Fred, for the sake of discussion, that there is a recession, or what is universally seen by people as the equivalent of a recession, that it's very bad economic times. Is there any way that the Republican nominee can win the election in the face of that?
It'd be very hard. I think there's a pretty solid rule that we've seen over the years in politics that the party that holds the White House suffers in economic bad times. Well, the Republicans still hold the White House, and it would hurt McCain, it would hurt the whole party. What I think he would have to do would be to go on offense against the Democrats and say, look, the Democrats are threatening a trade war. They not only want to reopen NAFTA and with our trading, our biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, they want to stop any more free trade agreements. They won't go along with the trade agreements with South Korea and Colombia, ones that are very helpful to the United States. So that's one thing. They're threatening a trade war, and people around the world are fearful of that now. Secondly, they will raise taxes in the teeth of a recession, which obviously that would make things worse. And thirdly, they're people who are slamming American businesses all the time. So in other words, his argument would essentially be they'll make things worse.
He needs to have a better argument than that. He needs to speak to the economic anxieties of those people that are being called Sam's Club Republicans. He can't just attack the Democrats with the old playbook. He needs to offer something real and hopeful to people who are being hurt by the economy, and it should be a reform Republican economic program, and they are working on that now.
Yeah, I think if he picked up both of those sets of talking points, he'd do fine. No, I kind of like Fred's negative attack on the Democrats. Look, we shouldn't ignore that Gerald Ford ran for re-election in 1976, a guy who had never been elected and appointed president, so to speak, succeeded after Nixon resigned, after the pardon, after a really tough recession in 1975. I mean, whatever recession we're going to have, it's not going to be, I don't think we'll see the unemployment numbers or the inflation numbers that Ford had to put up with. Ford came out of the conventions, down by about 25 points in 1976. The country wasn't in worryingly great shape, and yet he did raise questions about Jimmy Carter and the Democrats and ended up closing that 25-point gap by 23 points and almost won. I think you can do a lot of damage to the notion of a Democratic president who's going to raise taxes, launch a trade war, and try to nationalize health insurance and do a lot of things that the American public is going to be awfully nervous about, to say nothing of foreign policy. It needs to be combined with a positive message. But the Democrats are vulnerable.
Well, here's another point of view, which is, and I think you would agree with this, much of this election is going to be about the war in Iraq. And if it's about the war in Iraq, people are going to start to say, wait a minute, how much money are we spending over there? Why are we sending all this money to Iraq? And why is it that that's not online? We can't see those numbers, and why is it having such a tremendously negative impact on the American economy? And you're saying we should cut tax? I think that's what the Bush administration has done. Spent a lot of money in Iraq, and we don't know exactly.
A bad economy?
And people will argue that that's part of why we don't have a social safety net. We have such economic anxiety in this country, and it's time to understand exactly what's going on with that kind of war spending, unlimited, no end in sight. I think people are going to be very upset about it, and then you're going to say, oh, cut taxes, and the Democrats would raise taxes. No, Democrats are saying, let's put in place a social safety net. Let's take care of Americans and American workers first. I think that's a winning argument, Bill.
Well, now, look, I think Juan's wrong. The American people care about one thing about Iraq. Are we winning or are we losing? Up until this year, we've been losing. Now it looks a lot better. And look, the war's been going on for 5 years. All 5 of those years, the deficit in spending has been shrinking despite all this spending on the Iraq war. I just think saying the Iraq war is causing the economy to go bad, Juan, that won't fly. It just simply won't.
It's part of the conversation. No. It's an important part of the conversation. If you're talking about, and remember this, the economy now is in the slump. It's at this point and going forward that it's going to be, I think, a real negative for John McCain. And so he's got to have an answer. And I think the fact that he doesn't have an answer, all he says is let's have more war and let's have more tax cuts, that's just not a winning argument.
Somehow I can't imagine the vote for McCain. Let's have more war and more tax cuts. All right.